All right, students. So we talked about minimum wage legislation last time. Now the new concept which is right in front of you, that is market failure. Now this is the concept which is there in economics as well. So economic students might study that as well uh, when they will study advanced level concepts. Now let's discuss it, because in business we will not talk about how to draw graphs, because graphs are linked with market failure. But as far as business is concerned, we are not required to do it. Like, graphs are not required. So that is why I'll talk about it in general. Let's discuss it. What is a market failure? See the definition. When market fails to achieve the most efficient allocation of resources and there is under or overproduction of certain goods and services. Now, what does this mean? When we say market, so you know that what is a market? Now, here market means market system. Remember, you know that there are three types of economic systems: market economic system, planned economic system, and mixed economic system. We studied that in AS level. So here market means market system. So where resources are allocated on the basis of demand and supply. So whenever the demand of a certain product increases, its price also goes up, you know that, and producers are encouraged to produce more, and they allocate more resources for the production of those items whose prices are rising. Right? This is the market system. Similarly, if demand of a certain product is falling, obviously its price will also go down. So producers will be discouraged because they see lower profit in producing such products. So they will withdraw their resources from the production of such items. They won't produce them. Now, this is what we call the system, the market system, right? Where resources are allocated with the help of the forces of demand and supply. But there is a problem in this system. There is a flaw, and that is why we call it market failure. So market failure occurs in market system when demand and supply, they are not able to allocate resources in the most efficient way. Now, when I use the word most efficient way, it means in the public interest. People are not able to get the maximum benefit out of it. I mean, with the allocation of resources. So either the allocation of resources is over or is under allocation. Now, let me give you an example, because it's written there in the definition as well. Whenever you see overproduction of certain goods, we say there is a market failure. Similarly, whenever there is underproduction of goods and services, we say market failure occurs. Now, we need to understand, how can there be overproduction if people do not want it? Because according to market system, whenever there is lower demand, producers won't produce that. So how overproduction may happen? Now, let me give you an example. And I told you that we need to consider the interest of the people. When we say resources are being used in the most efficient way, it does not mean that they are actually able to satisfy the needs and wants of the people only. One thing should also be considered, and that is the people at large, whether they are affected in a positive way or a negative way, whether they are getting some benefit out of it or not, or either the reverse is true. Now, for example, if I say there is a factory which manufactures clothes, right? Now, people demand clothes and they are producing it. But that factory is polluting the environment. A lot of land pollution is there, right? Or water pollution is also there, for example. So, in that way, marine life is being disturbed. People who live nearby, their health is being affected, and they demand that this factory should not produce that much quantity of clothes because it is affecting our health. They are actually affecting the environment in the negative way. So we'll say that resources here are not being used in the most efficient way. And why they are using it then? Because whenever there is market system, the primary objective of every business operating there is to earn maximum profit. So if people want to buy clothes, okay, and factory can produce it, so they'll go for it. They will not take care of the effect on the society or the people nearby. Remember that. And do you know that if there is a negative impact on the people who are neither consumers nor producers, we call such an effect as external cost. Remember that. This is an external cost if pollution is created. People's life is being affected. This is an external cost. Why we are saying external? Because, okay, let me write it as well. It will help you in economics as well, I'm telling you. Now, there is social cost. Social cost is actually the cost which is paid by the whole society. And it's not only what you pay out of your pocket. Excuse me. It's not the cost which you pay out of your pocket. It includes the negative impact also, which is borne by those people who are neither consumers nor producers. So there is private cost plus there is external cost. Remember, this is cost to the whole society. Cost to the whole society. It includes consumers as well as producers, right? Cost to the whole society. Now, when we talk about private cost, do you know what is it? Anybody who can explain me that? Or any idea?
Sir,
Or
cost of the business producing goods.
all right. Thank you. So, private cost is actually, let me write it there. It is the cost borne by either, borne by those people who are involved in an economic decision making. Decision making. It is the cost borne by those people who are involved in economic decision making. And what is an economic decision? It can be either to produce it or to consume it. So it means who takes such decisions? It will be either the consumer who will decide about it or the producer, right? So whatever cost they bear, that is the private cost. When you go to a market to buy something, that is your decision, na? So you have to pay that cost. This is your private cost. Similarly, producers, they buy raw material again to produce something. Again, it's their decision. They take that decision. Again, that is a private cost for the producer, right? So private cost is for those people who are involved in the decision making. So two types of people take the decision either as a consumer or as a producer, right? Now, if I talk about external cost, external cost is also called third party cost, right? It is also called spillover effect. Remember that. Spillover effect or third party cost. Do you know why we are calling it third party? Anybody who can explain me that? Why we are calling it third party cost?
Sir,
Because
since
the ones
Yeah,
who are being affected are not either consumers nor producers.
very good. Excellent answer. Why we are calling them third? Because first is producer, second is consumer. That's it. So it means third party includes those people who are neither consumer nor producers. That's why the cost they bear, we call it third party cost. Good. Now let me write it there. Third party cost. Cost which is borne by those people who are neither producers nor consumers, right? Okay, so they now if they are not producers or consumers, so how can they pay cost? Can anybody tell me how do they pay cost if they are not either producers or consumers? Anybody? I am waiting.
sir, कुछ ऐसी कॉस्ट जैसे फॉर एग्जांपल देयर इज अ स्मोकर एंड जो प्रोड्यूस कर रहा है उसको धुएं से फर्क नहीं, यानी अब जो नॉन स्मोकर है उसको धुएं से फर्क नहीं पड़ेगा, लेकिन जो पी रहा है उस प्रोड्यूसर और कंज्यूमर के अलावा एक पासिंग बाय जो नॉन स्मोकर है उसको भी फर्क पड़ेगा इस टाइप का।
Yeah, okay, all right. So you are talking about passive smoking. Yeah, that's right. So, for example, if the smoker, okay, listen, smoker is also getting affected by smoking, but that is his private cost. That is his decision. But people who are not smoking, they are getting the negative impact of it as well in the form of passive smoking, and that is not their decision, right? But they are getting a negative impact. So that is the cost borne by such people, and we call them third party costs. So similarly, if a factory pollutes the environment, so the effect which is on the society or the people living nearby, that will be the external cost or third party cost to the society. Now, in a market system, external cost is not considered at all as a cost. Producers always see their private cost. Similarly, consumers always see their private cost. They do not care about it, how other people are being affected. So that is why, for example, if there is a good whose private cost is low, remember, there is a good whose private cost is low, but external cost is high. So what will happen? Consumers will be ready to buy it, right? They will demand it. Similarly, producers will be willing to produce it because it's cheaper. Private cost is low, both for consumers and producers. But external cost is high. So in total, social cost will be high because social cost is the sum of private and external cost. So overall, it's that item should not be produced, right? Why? Because when we add both of them together, it actually we get a huge number of social cost. But because market system clearly ignores external cost, so that is why they keep on producing. They keep on producing. Let me write it there as well. In market system, producers keep on producing a product if its private cost is low, although low despite the fact that their external cost is high. Now, this is not good for the society, right? And we always consider the society as a whole rather than individuals. So in a market system, producers keep on producing products. Let me write products. If its private cost is low despite the fact that their external cost is high. I hope that you are clear about it. So what will happen? It will result into overproduction. This is what we call, or we can say over allocation of resources, right? Overproduction or over allocation of resources. Why? Because we won't only consider the demand of the consumers there. We have to consider the demand of the society as a whole, right? So that is why we'll say that this will be overproduction or over allocation of resources. So we'll say whenever this happens, society demands that less of that good should be produced, but more of that good is being produced right now. So we'll say there is a market failure. Demand and supply are not helping the society in allocating resources in the most efficient way, because resources will be used in the most efficient way only when it is in the best interest of the society as a whole rather than the individuals. So that is why over allocation or overproduction is the cause of market failure whenever this happens. Okay, all right. Any question regarding this concept regarding overproduction or over allocation? This is what we call, let me write it there as well. This is what we call called market failure. And but this is one reason. It is called market failure. Right? Now, getting back to the original slide, now you can see when market fails to achieve the most efficient allocation of resources. I have explained you what does it mean when we say most efficient allocation of resources, and there is under or overproduction of certain goods and services. Now, okay, we can talk about overproduction of goods and services as well. Now, let's see the same example, right? The same equation. Sorry. Now, let's say, now what happens that social cost is a sum of private and external cost, but now external cost is low and private cost is high, right? So in that case, what will happen? If for a certain product external cost is low and private cost is high, and when it happens, let me explain you. There is another equation, we call it social benefit. Private benefit plus external benefit. Again, it's very easy to interpret it. Social benefit means benefit to the whole society. Private benefit means benefit which is enjoyed by those people who are involved in an economic decision making. So they can either be buyers or consumers. You buy an ice cream and then you eat it. This is your private benefit. Producers construct a factory building and then they sell their goods and get profit. Profit is the private benefit of producers, right? But external benefit is, for example, a factory building is there and they construct a road as well because of that. So now other people are also getting the benefit. They can use that road as well. Earlier, the road was very rough. Similarly, people from nearby can be employed as well. It will be the decision of the factory to hire them. So they will get income. Again, it is an external benefit. Similarly, for example, if factory is there and now to protect factory building, owner hires guards. So now there are 10 guards protecting the building of the factory. So the people who are living nearby, they will also feel protected. Why? Because they feel that they will be safe because guards are there. So now the cases of theft and robbery will be reduced because of that. Again, this is an external benefit because decision was taken by the factory owner. Now, if now imagine now, for example, if in an economic decision making, external benefit is high, but private benefit is on the lower side. What will happen? Producers won't produce because the private benefit of the producers could be profit. So if producers feel that there is not much profit in selling a certain product, for example, it's about sugar. If sugar is the price is very low, right, and they feel that now it's not worth selling it or producing it, so they won't produce it. They will not allocate resources for the production of sugar, right? But people who are living nearby, because if I talk about sugar mill, people, a lot of people can be employed over there because the factory is in that area where there are lots of people who are unemployed, for example. So it means external benefit is on the higher side. Or secondly, if factory would be there and they will keep on producing, so uh, there might be a road built there as well. So there might be more traffic there. So other people would also like to uh, start their own shops as well there because now the road is there and traffic is there, and you know that wherever there is customer traffic, there is a shop there, so it's easy to sell goods from there because people can easily find the shop near the roadside. But think about if there is a road which is very rough, people hesitate to go through that area. So if the shops are there in that area as well, so obviously they will be affected because majority of the people will use the other way. So in that case, society will not get the benefit. Society wants that production should take place, but it won't take place in that case. So again, we'll say that in a market system, because external benefit is high, but private benefit is low, so producers won't produce it, and eventually the society will not get the benefit they deserve. So we'll say again that could be a cause of market failure, right? And what do we call external benefit? Anybody? What do we call external benefit? Anyone? Again, third party benefit, right? Third party benefit. Okay, now getting back to the definition, now you understand this. So what is market failure and how it occurs? So market failure can occur in two ways. Either there is under allocation of resources, as I told you in case of higher external benefits and lower private benefits, or it can be because of overproduction, and that happens when external cost is high and private cost is lower. So you can see the causes of market failure. These could be because of external cost. I explained that. This could be because of labor training as well. Like for example, workers are demanded. Why? Because products are needed by everybody, right? So those workers are in demand who can produce such products. But because workers are not trained for that, and no business wants to give training to workers because it involves cost, right? So that is why they do not provide training to workers. What will happen? Then resources will not be allocated for the production of goods and services which people want or society as a whole want. So it means market failure will occur because there will be under allocation. Those people will remain untrained and they will not be utilized for the production of those goods which are demanded by the society as a whole or the people there. So that is why training is provided by the government, because nobody wants to provide training because it will increase the cost, and they always have a fear if they provide training their competitor might grab them. So why to spend money if there is a fear there? So that's why they don't do it. Similarly, monopoly producers, again you know that monopolists always see their own profit, right? So they will only allocate resources for the production of such items where they see more profit. So it means if majority of the population is poor and they are not able to afford it, they won't allocate resources for those goods which are which can help in production of those goods and services which are demanded by those poor people. So again, we'll say under allocation of resources in that case, and that will be the result of market failure. Similarly, how can we correct market failure? Like how can we reduce overproduction or how can we increase if there is a case of underproduction? Imposition of fines and limits. Now, if you think a factory is polluting the environment as well, and it is against the public interest, and that is the cause of overproduction or over allocation of resources, so government can impose fines and limits so that the business will limit the level of production. In that way, less of pollution will take place and there won't be overproduction or over allocation of resources. Second is provision of training. I told you, to avoid, if nobody is providing labor training, government will provide them labor training. So in that way, workers will be more skilled and they will be utilized for the production of those goods and services which benefit the whole society or the whole country. Similarly, regulated monopolies and competition policies. Government is always against monopolies, you know that. So government can take actions to restrict monopolies, and for that they pass laws that you cannot charge a very high price or you cannot allocate all your resources for the production of one of the item, because if monopolies are not able to produce what they want to, so obviously either they will close down their business or they will use resources for other production of for other goods and services as well, which government points out. And then government also encourages competition. So whenever there will be competition, so if that firm is not providing the goods and services or not using the resources for the production of those goods and services which are demanded by the people, then other businesses which are coming in or which are encouraged by the government, they will provide the goods to the people. They will allocate resources for those goods and services. So in that way, the underproduction or the problem of under allocation of resources will be resolved. Now people will get the goods they want. All right. So last slide is about income elasticity of demand. Now do remember, income elasticity is a concept which tells that if there is a change in income, how much change will be there in demand. Remember that. If there is a change in income, how much change will be there in demand. Generally, you know that income and demand has a positive relation. So what is happening? Why the students are leaving? Any idea? Rabia, are you there?
Yes, sir.
What is happening?
I don't know, sir.
Okay, all right. So I'll keep on teaching because this is the last slide.
Ji,
You
sir.
know that income has a positive relation with demand. When income rises, people have more purchasing, right? But this concept tells that if income rises, let's say by 10%, how much change will be there in demand? What percentage of demand will increase, right? Okay. Or when income falls by a certain percentage, what percentage of demand will follow it? Now, see, in this we'll actually talk about three types of goods. One is normal goods. Normal, obviously high quality goods. And when income rises, people buy them. Think about English toothpaste. It's cheap.
Excuse me, sir.
And people buy the but yes, please. Yes. Junaid, are you there? Okay, let me complete my lesson. So normal goods are
क्लास से कोई रिमूव कर रहा है
सर काफी बच्चों को रिमूव कर रहे हैं
all right.
अब्दुल्ला हुसैन कह रहे कल इसने हमें भी करता रहा था तो ये अब्दुल्ला हुसैन है 110% कंफर्म
Abdullah Hussain,
Yes, sir.
what are you doing?
Sir, कुछ भी नहीं.
Okay, all right. I will
Sir.
address this issue. I will address this issue. I have marked your attendance. So you can see my video on the YouTube channel. All right. Now, listen carefully. So normal goods I explained you. These are good quality goods. When income rises, their demand also rises, right? There are luxury goods, okay? And they are bought more when income rises. Like for example, if income rises by 10%, so people may increase the demand for normal goods by 10%, right? Or by 8%, okay? But in case of luxury goods, if income rises by 10%, people tend to buy more than 10% of luxury goods compared to their previous purchase. Like if there's a 10% increase in income, there will be a 20% increase in demand for luxury goods because people are waiting to have such an income where they can buy those luxury goods like all branded clothes, expensive cars, right? But when we talk about inferior goods, these are low quality items. I told you earlier. Now, low quality items means that if you do not have sufficient income to buy normal goods, you buy inferior goods because right now your preference is cost. You do not have enough money. So, when your income increases, demand for inferior goods goes down. Remember that. So, now we need to understand whenever we see that there is an increase in income and as a result there is even a higher increase in demand. Like for example, if I say there is a 10% increase in income and as a result there is a 20% increase in demand, we'll say the demand of that product is elastic. Remember, elastic. It means demand responds more whenever there is a change in the income. So the change in the demand is greater than the change in income. And this happens in case of luxury goods, right? When we talk about normal goods, normally its demand is inelastic. It means when there is a rise in income, there is also a rise in demand of normal goods as well, but demand does not rise in the same manner. If there is a 10% increase in income, so you might see a 5% or 6% increase in the demand for normal goods. But if we talk about, so in both cases, the relation is positive. Income elasticity of demand will be positive, right? But in case of luxury goods, it will be elastic. In case of normal goods, it will be inelastic. Okay, in case of inferior goods, income elasticity of demand is negative. Now, what does it mean? It means income and demand, they move in the opposite direction. And this is not the case in case of normal and luxury goods. So, when income rises, people tend to buy less. Do you know why? Because they start buying normal goods. That is why. And when income falls, people tend to buy more of inferior goods because now they cannot afford normal goods, so they start buying inferior goods. So income elasticity of demand in case of inferior goods is negative. Let me show you the formula because that was the last slide and I will stop then. Let me show you the formula of income elasticity of demand because they can ask you to calculate that or they can ask you to interpret it, income elasticity of demand. I will demonstrate that and then I'll stop there because chapter will be over, right? Okay, this is income elasticity of demand. Now the formula is, let me write it there. This is, we call it YED. Y is for income, right? ED is for elasticity of demand. Income elasticity of demand. The formula is percentage change in income over percentage change in demand, or you can say quantity demanded. This is the formula, right? Now, let's take an example as well. Let's say there is an income, let's say it is 100, okay, and the demand of a certain product, let's say this is quantity demanded, right? Let's say it is 20, okay. Now income rises to 200 and demand rises to 30 only, okay. Now if we need to find out the income elasticity of demand, how can we calculate that? Now remember, to find out percentage change in income, the numerator, what do we do? Let me write it there. Here we say change in income, right? Change in, okay, just a minute. All right, I guess this is not the formula. Just a minute. Let me change it. Let me write it there. YED is equal to percentage change in quantity demanded, right? I actually wrote the reverse of it, over percentage change in price, in income, right? Income, Y is for income. Now to find out percentage change in quantity demanded, what do we use? We use, okay, this formula, change in income, right, over, sorry, now income is not there, now we are taking demand. Just a minute, I need to remove that as well. Now here, change in quantity demanded over quantity demanded before change, that is the formula, okay, into 100. This is the formula to calculate percentage change in quantity demanded, right? So now if we use the figures here, now change in quantity demanded is how much? It is 10, right? Then what is the quantity before change? It is 20, right? And then we'll multiply it with 100. So we'll get how much? That will be 50%, the answer. So it means the change in demand is 50%. So now let's see what is the change in income. We need to see that as well. The formula is almost the same, but we'll use income instead of demand. Now see, we'll write now change in income over income before change into 100, right? Now see this formula, into 100, right? Now if I use the figures in this formula, if I put it in, so change in income is how much? 100, right? Divided by income before change, that was 100, into 100. So obviously the answer will be 100%. So it means now it is clear. So now if we use it in the formula here, right? So it will be it will be percentage change in quantity demanded is now 50%. Okay, if we divide it with, and now percentage change in income is 100%, right? So our answer will be 0.5. Now do remember, our answer is 0.5. So whenever our answer comes less than 1, 0.5 is less than 1, we say that demand is inelastic with regard to income. It means whenever income changes, not much change happens in demand, right? And that happens in case of normal goods, although the relation is positive. Similarly, if answer comes greater than 1, we call it elastic demand, and that means demand responds more than the change in income, and it happens in case of luxury goods. So I can write it there as well, that YED, if it comes greater than 1, using the same formula I told you, we call it elastic demand, right? And okay, a better word is income elastic demand, because we are talking about income elasticity, income elastic demand. If your answer comes YED less than 1, then we call it income inelastic demand, right? So, and similarly, when your answer comes negative, I am telling you, it can happen, because in case of inferior goods, do you know what happens? In that case, I'll actually take the same example. So instead of increasing, the demand falls. So instead of going to 30, demand goes to 10, right? So now the answer will be in minus, I am telling you. Now if you use the same formula, the answer will be in minus. How? If you see this one, if we calculate percentage change in quantity demanded using this formula, right? We calculate that. Now if we use it there, the new figure, so now what will happen? Change in quantity demanded is how much? Now it is not 10, it is minus 10, right? And we'll divide it with 20 and into 100, right? So our answer will be in negative. So it will be minus 50%. See? So now when you will be using it in the formula, obviously minus sign will come, and your answer will be negative. And that happens normally in case of inferior goods. So this is how you can calculate income elasticity demand as well. Any question?